Okay, so from there, we've got our split squats. Here we go. So here's some basic loading strategies for the split squat. Just a few samples of each. Again, light before heavy, so obviously we start body weight. So look at this, when my hands are in front, see that slight forward hinge? My shin's fairly vertical at the front. Now here we go to prisoner grip. What does that do? Puts the lats on stretch. We now have more of an extension bias. So that's going to be a great option for teaching somebody who sits at a desk all day, whereas the first option is good for somebody like myself or any athletes that tend to be very extension based. Right, goblet position, everybody should be familiar with goblet position. It's generally a great way to load most movements. We get a bit of anterior core work. It's very user friendly for a lot of reasons. Offset racked is much the same, but now we've got that slight asymmetrical component. Right, the load's on that right side, it's pulling my left knee into valgus, so we get a bit more external rotator work on that front side. Same story here with the suitcase position. This is usually where we go to. It's a bit easier because it's a shorter lever, but also you can go heavier down there. You know, there becomes a limit to what weight you can hold up in that racked position. Right, so obviously double suitcase, now that the weight's getting heavy enough. So I'll sort of milk that racked position for all it's worth, then go heavy. Now then we can go lighter again and bring them back up to the double racked position. Just sort of one last hurrah of using smaller implements, because you get all that fun stuff that happens in double racked position, which basically isn't fun at all. So there's the back bar loaded version, pretty basic, but you see that there's a lot of progressions to milk first. And for your general population clients, that might never get here. The safety squat bar option is always good because it sort of saves the shoulders. So again, especially with your general pop clients. And the front racked is nasty, so that's more for your advanced people. So range of motion as a priority. As I said, we want to see that knee get to the ground. Right, there really should be no reason why they can't get that knee right down. In terms of a structural limitation, it's more going to be a mobility restriction, and that mobility restriction may very well actually be a stability limitation because they're sensing a threat, so they're not able to get down there. Now, granted, I will actually go through some troubleshooting for that soon, but some SMR and things like that can definitely help. So extension or flexion bias, what I was talking about there over the video in terms of the prisoner grip, but also what we want the weight to do to them. So if we have that sort of desk jockey person, then prisoner grip is probably a good way to get them learning the movement, and good options for loading them will be something like, obviously not straight away, but something like that double racked kettlebell position is going to drive a bit of extra extension, and especially that front racked position if they can get there. Now, granted, you run into a lot of other problems. If you get that desk jockey person, they've likely got shoulder issues and it might not be ideal, but if you've got somebody there, that can be great because it forces that thoracic extension. And you see, I use that one quite a bit for those we can. But if not, if we've got those, we've got those athletes. Again, as I said, I train a lot of soccer athletes, and these guys walk around in a wicked extension. It doesn't mean that that's necessarily bad. I'm not trying to fix, I'm air quoting here, fix their anterior pelvic tilt or anything like that. But if they're hanging out in end range extension all day and through their sport, then I probably don't want to put them under load there. It's time to get them into a bit more of a flexion bias. So things like those racked positions or suitcase positions with the forward hinge is usually where I tend to go for those guys. And then you've got, consider the stability. So is it more of a stability factor because you're giving them an asymmetrical load, or is it just about loading them up? So something like the double suitcase position where they're nice and even, but you can hold a lot more load, versus the positioning. So in positioning both in terms of the body and variations that we can do to their foot position and their stance, but also the positioning of the load. If they're holding a bar in a front rack position, or even something I didn't show there, something like, say, a sandbag on their shoulder or a sand bell on their shoulder, that's a longer lever than having that suitcase position when we think about where the load is relative to their center of gravity. And knee control, again, back to that sort of anterior knee pain client, we consider that often driving forward with the knee is problematic for them. Not because there's anything wrong with the knees going forward over the toes, not at all. But just for some people, it might cause pain. So what do? We train around it. We make it so it doesn't hurt. So a shin block can be useful for them. I think that's what I'm showing here. Yeah, so here's the basic shin block method of teaching somebody the split squat. So I'll usually teach them this in the early days, so that by the time they're ready to load up the exercise, That would be for your flexion-based client, because I've got the prisoner grip. We're using a very upright torso, so that would be to sort of exaggerate at the start to take somebody there to learn the position. Now here's a really crappy video of an incorrect one. You know when you do a movement pretty well and you can't remember how to show it incorrectly? That's kind of me here. But I'm just trying to make the point of what they do is they sort of run their shin into the block and then kind of use their lower back to get up rather than drive up, and see that forward angle of the femur there as well. Again, looking to crank forward rather than tuck under and get the actual stretch through the quad. Okay, so as we spoke about at the start, the stride length will have and the posture will have an effect on the joint actions. So look at these little subtle changes I make. Here's a short stride, which I've been naturally using lately because I realized I have no quads and I'm trying to be more quad dominant because I'm very hip dominant. So that was a forward shin. Now look what I do here. Without changing the feet, I now have a vertical shin and a forward torso. So I basically switched. I want to show that one again because that's important. Look at my torso angle and my shin angle. Upright torso, forward shin. Very quad dominant. Not ideal for most people. Most people will do better here. Forward torso, vertical shin. Much more knee friendly, much more hip dominant, more athletic. Long stance, looking for more stability, but crappily cranking that hip forward. And now you see I tuck that pelvis under. Now I've got a much better position for a long stance. So it's more hip dominant, but I'm controlling that pelvis. I'm not just hanging out in extension. So they're all little considerations when you're setting up your split squat. So that's what I was talking about, developing the coach's eye. And looking for those subtleties. And if you ever saw me training somebody, you see I get in there very hands-on. I'll be in there like I'll push a knee into position and get my fingers in their hip and push the hip back to where I want it, and sort of make them malleable. Right, I mold them like they're Play-Doh and get them into the positions I want, and then make them get familiar with it. So regressions and pregressions. Pregression's the term I prefer now instead of regressions. Credit to David Elnavi for that term as well. It just sounds much more positive, like we're going somewhere with it rather than, oh, you suck, we have to take you back a step. But a lot of people don't think of these. They think, oh, body weight, that's enough. You will have people who flat out cannot do a good body weight split squat. So some regression options. TRX is the easiest one. Right, let's hang back, which gives you that vertical shin by default. And they can deload themselves as much as they want by using their arms to help or not to help. The band's also a good option, especially if you want to focus on getting deep, because it's still kind of hard, but it just deloads the bottom part because it's, again, an accommodating strength curve. And this option I pinched from John Izzo. I haven't used this one too much, but it is an option. You do tend to lean forward into it, so that knee comes forward a bit. But it's just a bit of a different vector, so you might find that one client that one works better for. Oops, wrong button. All right, more regressions, or is that the same one? Oh, same one. Okay, so then progression. So as well as just adding weight, we can add range of motion. As I said, I put a premium on range of motion. Here's my client Deb performing some front foot elevated split squats. She uses really good form. Now look at that front hip. To really get a feel for how deep that is, look at the angle of that front hip. Right, she's only a small girl, and that step's sitting up on a couple of risers, and you see she still kept that really good vertical shin on the front. So that's really going to give somebody good familiarity with taking their hip flexors through a full range of motion and that quad on the rear leg. You get them going through a phase of that front foot elevated split squat. One, it's a good pregression to go into the rear foot elevated split squat, which has even more of a stretch. But two, from there, they're in really good shape to be able to start loading up the split squat heavy, because now split squat to the ground doesn't seem like such a full range of motion anymore. It's not like getting to the ground's their limit. They're used to going well past that depth. So getting to the ground becomes easy. We can also extend the time under tension. So think now to our body composition clients. 1.5 reps. You can 1.5 rep a lot of exercise. Split squats is something that works particularly well on. So see, I've used that short stride because I'm trying to get quad dominant, because I have no quads, as you can see. See how I tuck under, get the little pause, halfway up, pause, come back up. Right, great for putting that metabolic stress straight into the quads, or whatever the target muscle is. You might want to make it more hip dominant. The dead stop. Okay, first of all, again, this is one of the ones I've written a blog about this fairly recently. There's a longer video demonstration. I'm going to play this while I go away and sneeze. Okay, so the idea here is we're working on some reflexive stability. Right, so I'm trying to grab that kettlebell straight away on the way up, not hanging and get my balance and then come up. I want to grab it straight away. That's getting a bit too far forward now. I'll lose my balance a bit and come up. So we get a lot of extra time and attention there too, because you're essentially doing 2 reps for every one.